Welcome back. 13 members of the House of Representatives believe the upcoming appropriations bill may be the easiest way to stop the Trump administration from executing on its executive order to make it easier to fire federal employees. The Office of Management and Budget has already announced plans to convert 88% of its workforce to the new Schedule F. Democratic Congressman Don Beyer represents Virginia's 8th district. He joined 12 of his colleagues on a letter to Appropriations Committee chairs and ranking members. Congressman, welcome. Thanks very much for coming on the program. This letter that you signed says, we write to request the forthcoming continuing resolution or omnibus spending bill include language that reverses the implementation of this executive order and requires the immediate return of any federal employee reclassified pursuant to it. Is this a money issue or a legislative language issue that you're pursuing here, sir?
Oh, this is very much a legislative language. It's really not about the spending of federal dollars, Francis. It's about the character of our civil service. More than 140 years ago, we passed the Pendleton Act, which said that our civil service, the federal employees who serve all of us, need to be largely politically independent, not Democrats, not Republicans, and certainly not on the job. And so the presidents have the opportunity to appoint a relatively small percentage of the workforce, less than 5%, as Schedule C appointments. Think Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, the Assistant Secretaries, that are loyal to the president, reflect his or her values. But the most federal employees should be out there serving the American people, not swinging left or swinging right, depending on who the president is.
The letter that you signed says, please consider using some or all of the legislative language in the Saving the Civil Service Act. What's the essence of that? Is it basically, we don't want Schedule F, revert to the Pendleton Act, or is it more complex than that, Congressman?
No, I think it's just pretty much just, let's get rid of the Schedule F. You go almost back to Andrew Jackson, way before you and I were born, when the federal government was just full of political cronies. And so it would empty out every 4 years or every 8 years. And what you want instead are professional scientists at the EPA, at NOAA, professional scientists in the labs, and especially at the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, where they're trying to do thoughtful long-term policy decisions that help us spend the money. Now they've taken 88% of the OMB and made them basically at-will employees. They can all be fired between now and January 20th.
What have you learned since the time you were on the program the last time and we discussed the idea you wanted to learn more about who was being classified where? What have you learned since then? Other than the report that we've seen about the Office of Management and Budget classifying 88% of its employees as Schedule F, I have not seen other reports. Have you, sir?
Yeah, Francis, that's really an interesting twist that you bring up, because one of the things that we worry a little about, like really little, is the notion of so-called burrowing in. When a political appointee of a given president finds a way to convert himself into a career civil service appointee. And, that's not a completely inappropriate thing. A lot of people get there and say they love their job and they like to stay. But with the Schedule F, if you can suddenly fire 85% of the employees and replace them with Schedule F employees that don't have to go through the vetting process, you could transform a whole government overnight in ways that would not be good for the American public.
If Schedule F were to disappear tomorrow, Congressman, what would that say to you about the burrowing in issue? Would that worry you as much as it does now, the idea that someone wants to convert from political to career? And how does one go about ascertaining whether someone's doing it for altruistic reasons or for ideological reasons?
Yeah, I think it would make me worry much, much less about it. Francis, as you know, a dozen years ago, I led the transition team for President-elect Obama at Department of Commerce. And one of the charges was look and see who's burrowing in. And 12 years later, I can't think of a single person that we thought had burrowed in inappropriately. And so you're just trying to be alert to that. But that's going to be a handful of people rather than 88% of the workforce in a given agency.
This letter is dated within the last several days, sir. Have you gotten any response from the leaders on the appropriations committees about whether this language could actually make it into the omnibus bill that it appears, at least, that your side and the Senate side of the Hill will vote on soon?
Francis, I'm actually really hopeful about it, because this should not be a partisan issue. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is trying to play political games with the civil service that serves every American. I had a chance to be in the State Department for 4 years, and I never knew who those Foreign Service officers that worked with me were for. They were very careful about keeping their political beliefs wrapped up because they knew that they had to serve whoever it was. And I certainly tell you, from our constituent service, we never think to ask a constituent what their political values or appropriations are. We're there to serve them, every American.
To the issue of bipartisanship, sir, we've tried to identify, since this executive order was signed, some expert who has served previously in a Republican administration who would be willing to come on the air and talk about the potential benefits of Schedule F. We've been unable to do so. Have you had those conversations with your Republican colleagues currently sitting in Congress about whether they support this or not?
I have, and I haven't found anybody that supports it. Because most people, if you're going to be in political life, you have an obligation to think long term, to think about the unintended consequences of any legislation. So my Republican friends have to be thinking about 4 years from now, 8 years from now, when they perhaps elected a Republican president again. What do they really want us stuffing all these agencies with our Democratic operatives? No. Now, this is a commitment to good government across party lines.
Congressman Don Beyer, thank you very much for joining me as always. I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you, Francis.